From deep in the heart of Central Texas, it's the Best of the Outdoors podcast, brought to you by Texas Fishing Game Magazine, the voice of the Texas outdoor nation. I'm your humble host, Dustin Warncke, the outdoor success guy, back with another podcast with you. So excited to have the chance to sit down with you guys again and just visit with you about Texas and beyond, and all the different hunting and fishing and shooting things that you can do in the outdoors, especially here in the winter months, because we're in February now. Thank you guys so much for watching, reading, and listening to our content, and especially for tuning into this podcast. It means the world to me to be able to share this time with you and to be able to encompass all that is the outdoors that God has given us to enjoy while we're here on earth. And I mean, I love this stuff, man. I love the medium of podcasting, where I can share this with you from my little home office here in Central Texas, and just get to be able to share all that encompasses the outdoor lifestyle in Texas and beyond. So anyway, wherever you're listening, however you're listening, thank you so much for doing so. Hit the smash, I should say. A lot of guys say smash the subscribe button wherever you're listening. If it's YouTube, that's great. If it is on Podbean, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, any of those, that's a great way to keep up with our new shows and just to get downloaded right to your mobile device, your phone or tablet or whatever, every 2 weeks. And we have a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for the SHOT Show love. 4 podcasts we did back to back there, 2 with Dustin Ellerman, 1 with Dustin Warncke, yours truly, myself, and then 1 with Chester Moore. Got great ratings on those, downloads and plays and streams and everything like that. It was really cool, fun time. I had to take a little bit of a break because, my goodness, I was winded after that, after doing all the selling all day and the podcasting all night and singing for my own supper. That was just a crazy time, but it just feels so good to be back. I've got some product review podcasts coming up. I'm going to talk about some of the stuff I've been reviewing on YouTube. Some of you guys listen on YouTube, so that's a good way to plug into my stuff there. Also, if you've not done this already, go home and check out the Amazon Alexa app on your phone, or on your the actual Echo, I believe is what they call it, the Echo Mini or the Echo Dot, whatever the case may be. The Amazon Alexa machine, if you will, the audio machine that you can put in your kitchen or your bedroom or your bathroom or whatever, and say, Alexa, play the Best of the Outdoors podcast, and she'll play the Best of the Outdoors podcast through iHeartRadio. And that is really cool. She'll play the latest episode of the Best of the Outdoors podcast on iHeartRadio. I think that is really cool. So you can go home, if you have an Alexa or have an Amazon Echo, you go online and do that. They have a PC app now for the Alexa too, but it didn't work as well as I wanted it to, so I was going to say you could do that too. But the Alexa, the Best of the Outdoors podcast, now you can listen on your Amazon Echo. Alexa, please play the Best of the Outdoors podcast, and she'll pull the latest episode from iHeartRadio. Really cool stuff, so I'm really excited about that. Also, wanted to show some love to some of our sponsors, some of the folks that has sponsored the Best of the Outdoors podcast, some of our digital sponsors, and this week that is Timney Triggers USA. They just came out with the Elite Hunter Remington 700 trigger. And this thing is going to be one of the really cool innovations in the Remington 700, because, that's an iconic gun. Bolt action rifle used by snipers, used by police departments, so on and so forth. Really a fantastic rifle, and that just unveiled at SHOT Show, which is just a beautiful trigger. They make triggers for all kinds of weapons. I own a lot of older weapons, as you guys know, but the Elite Hunter Remington 700 is the latest overnight success, 73 years in the making is the way they say it. I think that's kind of cool. I own 5 Mosin Nagants, which are World War II era Russian bolt-action rifles. I'm thinking of getting a Timney for that. I did get a Timney, and I talked about this in the podcast, I think, once before. Got one for my FN Mauser, chambered in .270 Winchester. Hunted with that gun this year with Norm ammunition and my Timney trigger in there, and killed a couple of nice deer, and really a cherry of a gun to shoot again. That military Mauser trigger just wore me out, and that gun was not that accurate as a result, because you always had that hard trigger press, and it just doesn't make sense. But we're talking like a real crisp, real clean Easy to pull, easy to press, easy to shoot. Trigger real light. I'm not saying it's a hairpin trigger, but it's a real light trigger. That's the way I like them, and the gun is just super accurate now. It's a sporterized Mauser, and really had a lot of fun installing the trigger. Had a lot of fun writing about it. I've got an article on fishgame.com on our digital issue, as well as on our blog, that talks about the progression of how I installed the Timney trigger, and really impressed with this thing. Also, Timney is doing the Journey Hunt giveaway. You could win, and you can register through our Facebook page, because we're going to be putting up the Facebook link to this, so you can just check out the Texas Fishing Game Facebook page, Texas Fishing Game Magazine Facebook page, the Journey Hunt giveaway. You can sign up for your chance to win an all-expense-paid hunt with Dave Watson, who's a guy that's been on TV for as long as I can remember. One lucky winner will join Dave on Ted Nugent's Spirit of the Wild Ranch, which is up near Waco, I think near China Springs here in Texas, for a once-in-a-lifetime hunt that will be aired on The Journey, which is a TV show, and the prize includes airfare and ground transfers to the Spirit of the Wild Ranch outside of Waco, Texas, lodging, all meals, choice of a Timney trigger, Timney hat, t-shirt, and hoodie. What are you waiting for? Take your shot. So you can go register for this on Timney's website. That's timneytriggers.com. Timney is Timney, triggers.com, or you can go to their website and click on and get over here. You can go to our Facebook page, and we actually have ads running on our website, as well as fishgame.com to check that out. All right. Other sponsor for this particular podcast, besides Timney Triggers, which I have a lot of great things to say about, Air Force Air Guns. Okay, been a fan of Air Force Air Guns since I can remember getting into media, which is about 2000 and geez, I can't even remember. It's been a long time ago now, but I officially got into filming my own hunts and stuff like that, and all this crazy stuff that I do now in 2012, which has been 7 years ago, and that's when I think got involved with Air Force Air Guns. And they make the Texan, which is the most powerful production air rifle, I believe, in existence today as far as it goes, and they've come out with the Texan LSS, and they came out with the Texan SS, which is a suppressed or sound suppressed version of the Texan, but now the Texan LSS is a full-length suppressed version of the Texan, and the cool thing about it is they make a retrofit kit for my Texan, which I have, a regular Air Force Texan that came out when it first was new, in 45 caliber. Well, they come up with a moderator kit or a sound suppressed kit where you have 500 foot-pounds of energy at just an amazing amount of power suppressed. All right, 500 foot-pounds of energy is huge for air gun. And think of air guns when you think of what you're shooting. Think of it much like a muzzle loader. It's going to run bigger slugs. It's going to run a bigger projectile, and it's going to run slow and hit like a hammer. And it's kind of like a 30-30 compared to a 223, okay? Not super fast, not super light, but heavy and hard. And that's the nice thing about what's going on with them. And the new thing they've got is RAW, the RAW, the Rapid Air Weapons Systems. They have a whole line of air guns that I believe they just acquired that company, if I'm not mistaken. And just, golly, get you an Air Force air gun. Get you a Talon P like what I've got. Get you a Condor, get you an Escape, get you a Texan. You can now legally hunt with air guns in Texas for whitetail deer and other game species during the respective seasons, along with rifles. And they just have some different guidelines and stuff they want you to follow and that kind of stuff. But anyway, so 2 gun sponsors on a fishing podcast. Sorry, that's just the way it worked out this week. But getting into the show, I wanted to definitely give a big shout out again to Air Force Air Guns and Timney Triggers. Air Force Air Guns you can find at airforceairguns.com. Also on our website at fishgame.com, you can click over and view the banners and reach Air Force Air Guns like that. Well, they get an amazing amount of traffic on our website, guys, and I think the reason is because they have such an awesome following as far as just an interesting looking gun. I mean, it's not really a gun that you see every day. It looks like something futuristic, and it really is. Kind of reminds me of the Desert Tech rifle, but another more on that later on another podcast. So, but really, the Air Force Texan LSS, fully suppressed, long air rifle, and you can run it from they have 308, they have 257, 308, 357, and 45 caliber. I have the 45 caliber. I love it. Take it hog hunting. I'm planning to get another video of it pretty soon, as soon as I get a crossbow hunt filmed. Just love this gun. I have a lot of fun with it. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching, reading, and listening. Here is our interview with Mr. Jeff Stewart, Jeff Cryptohulk Stewart, as he calls himself. And fantastic time. We go a little bit long on this podcast, and I'll warn you of that, but him and I share some of the best stories, man, that I think I've talked about on this podcast. Me fishing with my grandpa when I'm 5 years old, okay, in 1984. Him fishing with his dad, him fishing with his grandfather. I mean, just it's really worth the listen this week, guys. I'm serious, because we really talk about all that encompasses what we do in the outdoors and the heritage and the simplicity of catfishing compared to your high-end bass fishing and stuff like that. And I know Jordan Lee just won the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Shops tour circuit thing that they did, and I mean that's some high-end, high-level fishing in the sport. Catfish is just a kick back, lay back, fill up the ice chest, fill up the freezer sport, and it's not a hard fish to catch. And like I said, this is just something I wanted to bring you for Chester recommended we do this episode for winter catfish, and especially the big boys that lurk out there in the winter months for catfish. Is just a fantastic time to get out on the water, have a fantastic time in the outdoors, and catch that stuff. And I know I've been a little long-winded on this first segment, so here's my interview with Mr. Jeff Stewart. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks so much. Here we go. Joining me on the phone, Mr. Jeff Stewart, Jeff Cryptohulk Stewart. Is that correct? Did I say that right?
That is it.
So we were just talking before we started recording about some of the fishing adventures we've been on recently. And Jeff, you said you had just launched a boat, and no electronics, no graphs, no anything like that. And tell us about that.
We decided to go out the first part of this week. Weather was beautiful. Sure. We were tipping off close to 80 degrees, and it was just wonderful. So a cousin of mine had just bought a new boat, new used boat. So we took it out. River's so high we couldn't launch in our normal spot. So we launched on the Texas-Louisiana border there on the Texas side, close to Logansport, Louisiana. And
what lake or what
went
river?
Upriver.
Where were y'all at?
On the
Sabine River. Okay, cool. I understand.
And right before it goes into Toledo Bend.
Okay, cool. I was curious.
We went upriver, and with no way to depth finder or anything like that, so it was old school all the way. Taking the anchor, and when you'd find a spot you might want to fish, you go up there, drop the anchor over the side, and kind of do the old bob it up and down and touch the bottom, and then pull it up to see how deep it is. And we were able to, do that and find the water I wanted. I wanted to fish in about 6 foot of water right off of a sandbar on the downriver side of a sharp bend in the river. That way we weren't in extreme current. The fish would stage up there to get out of the extreme current.
Right.
So we did that, and we had enough success in our 2 days of fishing to have a really, really nice little fish fry.
Cool. That's great. And that's always a reward for a good catfishing trip, is a good fish fry, right?
That is the ultimate reward. I will be honest about this. I have catfished my entire life. And if I did not enjoy eating them as much as I do, I probably wouldn't go catfish. I would probably stick to, crappie and bass and bow fishing. But it's just hard this time of year with that water cold and clean. Those blue cats, you bringing them in about 2.5 pounders up to 5-6 pounders pretty readily. And those things are such good eating, and it doesn't take but 7 or 8 of those 5-pound fish to make a heck of a fish fry for several people.
Yeah,
and I really don't like keeping once they get over about 5-6 pounds. Maximum I like to keep a fish is about 15 pounds. Once they get over that, I turn them back loose. Generally, because over my years of fishing, I found that those bigger fish are fatty and strong tasting, and just if I can get a boatload of 2-pounders, I'll throw a 20-pounder back.
It's kind of like Roy Simmons calls them eaters, eating size catfish. I fished with him before, and my father-in-law is going out with a fishing trip with him for catfish here in the next couple of weeks, and then I'm taking my father-in-law fishing to Lake Conroe for Crosswater Outfitters Weekend. And the funny thing is, I was going to ask, do you know what the vernacular of floor fish means, Jeff?
What was it again?
Floor fish. Do you know what a floor fish is? This is what we use at Crosswater. This is the vernacular we use. So I'm just curious if you could guess what a floor fish is.
Now, back when I was a youngster, a floor fish was a fish that didn't quite meet the length limit. He was like, if the length limit's 12 inches, you'd have one that was about 11 3/4, and you'd toss him in the floor of the boat. So when you heard the game warden come, you'd pick him up and throw him back in the water.
Right.
Now,
right. Oh my
I do not condone that practice.
I know you don't.
I do not do that myself anymore.
I know.
But, when we were a kid, we didn't have the fishery that we have now, honestly. Texas Parks and Wildlife has done a wonderful job with our fisheries. And I can remember being a kid and going fishing, and all you caught were those fiddlers, those 9-inch and less fish. And, you had to search hard to catch a what we call a mess. Well, a good mess of fish so you could have a fish. So, when you caught one right on that cusp of man, he almost touches the line, because we always scratched the line wherever we sat in the boat. There was a line scratched in the finish of the boat that was the length.
Right.
And so, you get one that's almost touching it. So that's what we always call a floor fish.
It's kind of old school. I like that. Well, in Crosswater Outfitters, which is my fishing ministry that I'm a part of, we call a floor fish a fish that will not fit on the live well. It will only fit on the floor. So that's the big catfish that are like 20 pounds and up.
We had a 55-gallon drum that was cut half in two that sat in the middle of our boat.
Okay.
And you'd take a bucket and you'd put about 6 inches of water over in it, and then when you caught a fish, you just tossed him over in that.
Yeah.
But we didn't. My dad preferred a boat that had nothing in it, no rod boxes, no live wells, no nothing. It was usually a old Kingfisher stick steer boat. That's what we always fished out of, with just everything in it open, so you had room in that boat for whatever you wanted. And usually it was that big 55-gallon drum cut in half and an ice chest full of drinks, and the rest of that boat was fishing gear.
This just makes me reminisce to my younger days when I first started catfishing with my grandfather in I guess it was 1983, something like that. And basically, just the old school way of doing it was just, there's no school like the old school. And I say that all the time, but I mean, it's just, that was a simple way of doing it. We make things so complex with all the graphs and all the stuff like that. What my grandfather would do is put a boat in, go dig some redworms at the city park, and he'll put his boat in and go across the river to where his trot line was buried way deep in the water. And he'd catch some monsters out of there. And this is just in New Braunfels, Texas, where I grew up. This is real simple folk kind of fishing. And your stories bring me back to the days, the way that things were, back then, and how cool they were because they were so simple.
It was amazingly simple. I mean, my father and I started out fishing with my dad before I was old enough to walk. I mean, he would carry me in the boat, wrap me in a blanket, and then put a life jacket, a vest type life jacket around that, and cinch it up tight around me, and lay me in the bottom of the boat and take me with him with a formula or whatever in the ice chest. So I was there from the time. My earliest memories are fishing on the Sabine River and hunting on the Sabine Rivers. So, I know the simple stuff like that. We would take our trot lines 2 foot under the water if we could. You'd be elbow deep or further under the water, tying onto a good springy willow limb, so that boats that passed by didn't see your. My dog's over there barking.
No, that's fine. That's the same thing that we did.
Your line.
Yep, that's the same thing my grandfather did, man. Old school, just to keep your line below the water. Yeah.
Yes, and we had ponds that were secret ponds that we knew what pond had what my dad called slick perch in it. There's all different kinds. There's bluegill, there's red ears, there's sunfish, there's goggle eyes. There's all kinds, or warmouth as they're called, but we call them goggle eyes.
Yep.
And then there's a type of perch that's a little hybrid perch. And I've never known a scientific name for this perch. And the scales on them are very small, and the perch feels very slick whenever you run your hand down it and look at it. And they're a slender, long perch. Look almost like a cross between a warmouth and a red ear or something.
Okay.
I mean, they're just a different looking perch. And my dad always called them slick perch. And we knew what ponds had them because in his wisdom that he had very much of, he knew that the best catfishing was to be done with these perch, though. That they
Sure.
lived well on the line. They were tough bodied, so something couldn't just slap at them and knock them off the hook. And they caught good fish. And we had ponds all over East Texas, and we knew, well, this pond's got bluegill in it. This pond's got this in it. And this pond's got them little slick perch in it. And that's where we went first. And we fished with those. And people don't know, like, all your different kinds of catfish. We have what we always referred to as mall heads. People call them bull heads, and lots of different names for them. They're not a game fish. They're not regulated like most catfish are, like blues and channels. So you can actually use them as bait. And there's a green one and a brown one. And back in the 70s, 80s, we used a lot. We'd go to ponds that had those little bullhead catfish in them, and we'd put traps out and catch them that were about 2.5, 3 inches long. And a big old flathead or Opelousas catfish cannot resist that. And we regularly caught 70 and 80 pound Opelousas catfish back in the late 70s, early 80s with these simplistic techniques. Old trot line stretched across the river with window weights on it every 20 or so feet to hold it down on the bottom. And,
I love it.
about an 18-inch staging, and you put the window weight where the hook would be, probably 6 to 8 inches off the bottom, et cetera, et cetera. My dad, believe me, he ingrained in me how to catch catfish on trot lines, throw lines, jug lines. If it had a hook on it, me and my dad fished it.
Wow, that's great. What a great story. And that's the way we grew up, man. This is just, how old a man are you, Jeff? I forget. Always forget to ask.
I will be 47 in May.
Okay, I'll be 40 in May, so we're not that far away from each other in age. But it was the late 70s. I was born in the late 70s, and then the early 80s when I had my formative years of fishing. And still to this day, I still remember that park with my grandfather and the way that he had his trot line staged out there and underneath the water, the same exact way you're talking about, with the window weights and all that stuff. It was just use what you had, go catch you some mess of catfish, have a fish fry. Man, those were the good old days. And that's kind of, I never thought we'd go that way on the podcast, but man, that just brings back so many great memories for me,
Exactly. And what's even people don't understand today, and kids today will never know, because things have went so differently in modern times. As a 9-year-old kid, I had my own boat. I had a 14-foot aluminum boat with a 7.5 horsepower Mercury motor that all of it was hand-me-downs or junk that we had got somewhere and fixed ourselves. None of it was nice, new equipment, but it all ran good because we worked on it. And as a 9-year-old kid, my dad would go and launch my boat for me, and he had to go to work. He would leave. And so I had a little motorcycle, a little Honda dirt bike. And from our house down, we lived about a half a mile from the boat, our private boat launch.
Yep.
And I would ride my little dirt bike down to that private boat launch, and I would get in my boat at 7 o'clock in the morning, right at daylight or whatever, and I'd go run lines.
Wow, that's cool,
and
dude.
Then I would catch my fish and put it in the live box, come back, tie my boat up, ride the dirt bike back to the house, get in the car, and Mama would take me to school, and I would go to school all day. I'd get out of school and come home, get on that dirt bike, ride back down to our boat ramp, get in my boat, go run and bait up my lines for the evening.
Right.
And I would do that, at 9, 10 years old. Who in the heck today could trust a 9-year-old to go by themselves, to get in a boat, go upriver, and run lines?
Heck, I've got a 9-year-old, Yeah, I mean, it's a different world today. But, yeah, wow. That's amazing. What a story.
I wouldn't have trusted my son. To have rode the dirt bike at 9 years old down to the boat ramp.
Let alone to get in a boat and go upriver. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's
exactly.
That's kind of different. Yeah, I'm with you. Wow. What a story.
I mean, it was nothing for me, to honestly, my dad was working, 12 plus hour days. It was nothing for me to bring a mess of catfish home now with a 5-gallon bucket dangling from the handlebars of my motorcycle. Bring home enough fish, get home at 9 years old, get home with them, skin those fish, fillet those fish, plus cut up the bony pieces because we like the bony pieces.
Yep.
And get the grease ready, the meal ready, and be frying those fish at 9, 10 years old. When my dad pulled in the driveway, I was cooking fish for the family. My mom was inside getting other things ready.
You were going field to table. That's great. I mean, you were going water to table, but same difference. Yeah, field to table kind of thing. I mean, that what an amazing formative experience to have when you're that young. I mean, wow, what a story, Jeff. That's great.
And I attribute that to being that I turned out the way I did.
Sure.
I can honestly say I am somebody that grew up in the 70s, early 80s. I have never in my life taken an illegal drug, such as smoked pot or did any of that kind of stuff. Now, I grant you, when I was younger, I didn't know what the bottom of a beer can was, and thank the good Lord that I don't do that anymore.
Sure.
But it wasn't fishing that led me to that, but it was fishing that led me away from. Whenever all my friends were out on the weekends and so were smoking dope and snorting something or popping some pills, man, I couldn't do that because I was down on the river running a trot line.
You had to have all your.
Or I was out in the woods deer hunting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing about that made my experience of hunting or fishing didn't seem like it'd make it any more fun. So, and I have a group of friends that went with me on weekends a lot of times, and they didn't do the drugs either. We stayed on the river. Or we stayed in the woods, every free moment we weren't in school or playing sports, we were in the woods. And there's an old saying that, if you take your kids hunting and fishing, you don't have to go hunting your kids.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in that. But today it's so much different because that old, something that we use as a tool, you and I, and that is the internet. And we use that as a tool to earn our livings and things like that.
Yes, we do.
And that same internet can be used as a tool to grab a hold of your kids the wrong way.
Right.
So I urge parents out there, turn off the TV and turn off your computer after you listen to this podcast, and
of course,
after you read after you go and read our stuff on fishgame.com.
Yeah, that's right.
But grab up your kid and take them to the city park. I mean, I'm sure there's a pond at the city park.
Yeah.
Even if you live in town, there's a river, there's a pond, there's a lake going to be close enough to you to drive to. I promise you.
Yeah.
I mean, you can invest in a very cheap combination rod and reel. $10-12. They come with line. Most of them come with a little tackle box that's got hooks, sinkers, bobbers. All you need to do is find some worms. You can buy a box of worms for $2.
Right.
Or you can go out in the backyard and take a shovel and dig some. Or
yourself,
like I do, I hit the road ditches with just a tad of bleach and put just a few drops of bleach on worm mounds, and you can get those long, good earthworms that are about 1.5 to 2 foot long, and man, you can fish all day long with a couple of those.
Yeah.
So I urge you, get out there, take your kids. If you don't even catch a fish, who cares?
Yeah.
Sit on the riverbank, creek bank, lake, whatever, on the shore with your kid, talk to your kid, enjoy the day, eat something, drink something, laugh, giggle.
Sure.
Go home knowing that, wow, what a day.
Yeah.
Because my dad's gone. My dad passed away last December.
Yeah.
Or December before last. It was a year ago this December.
Right, I know that.
And I can't do that with my dad anymore. I did it my whole life.
Right.
And
it's a special time.
best memories of my dad were sitting on that riverbank fishing or in a boat fishing. And my mom fished. My mom still loves to fish. And believe me, some of my best memories with my mother have been while we were fishing too.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. Well, real quick, let's switch gears to bigger catfish strategies, because I've got a couple of tricks up my sleeve that I was going to run into as far as, for instance, big blues is what we catch on Lake Conroe all the time. And this is the time of year to catch them, especially the colder and nastier the weather gets, the better the fishing is. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, I mean, we use cut shad, fresh cut shad, that we catch, that we can cast net, the day before or the day of, and cut them in pieces, either if it's a big shad, 3 pieces, tail, midsection, and head, or right in the middle, and you just have a tail and a head section, and hook those for a jug line, and that's how we catch the big boys on Lake Conroe. What are your thoughts on that, Jeff?
Love shad. If you can get a hold of shad, just wow. And if you can get a shad that is about 3 inches long and you can fish him whole, that's even better. If you got to cut them up, that's great. What I like to do to give them just a little bit extra, I like to take my shad and cut them up about a day or 2 in advance. Put them in a gallon old pickle jar that's got a lid on it. And I like to pour a little bit of oil, like a vegetable oil, over the top of them and let them sit.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
In the refrigerator or somewhere where you can keep them cool. I usually put mine down in an ice chest because I don't have room in the refrigerator, and keep them cool because you don't want your shad getting softer than they would be, because what happens is this oil will actually toughen them up just a little bit, and that oil impregnates them so that when you hook them on and you drop them down, that oil is coming off into that water.
That's a great tactic.
And it's creating an oil slick.
Got them an oil slick,
and that helps a lot. My favorite bait for big catfish is crawfish.
Okay. Which is
Here
not something I've had a lot of success with, but in the Sabine River, I mean, I think that's a great idea. Tell me more.
If you can't find crawfish this time of year out putting traps out or anything, go to any place that sells boiled crawfish.
Okay.
And I've got 2 or 3 places around here, and I hit them up for their dead crawfish. When they do their culling of their crawfish, I give the owners, say, look, you put these in a gallon Ziploc bag or in an old ice bag or anything for me, and toss them in the freezer. And when I come, I'll pay you for them. I'll give you, $4 or $5 or whatever for a sack full.
Sure.
And they're always, most of the time, they don't charge me anything. They're like, man, just bring me a mess of fish if you catch some.
That works.
I love to catch my own crawfish and use them wild-caught live crawfish. But if I can't, I'll go and get those dead crawfish. And when I put them on the hook, I don't put them on there and leave them whole with the carapace on their top. You take and put your fingernail right where the tail armor meets their carapace, and you just pull that off, and that exposes their gills and their legs and all their entrails and everything. And let that be out there, because that's getting that fin out in the water. And so you put the hook in right at the base of the tail where their anal opening is, that comes out right at the front of their scoots, and you come through that and come out right in the middle of those legs. Okay. In their chest.
So you're just using the tail assembly, if you will. So you're taking the claws and the pinchers and the head off, right?
Leaving all that on.
Oh, leaving all that on.
No, you leave the claws and everything.
The way that you're hooking it. I see what you're saying. Okay.
All you're doing is peeling the armor, the shell off of that, and leaving all of that.
I understand. Okay, I get it. That's cool.
And that also helps if there's a little bit of current. That also helps because now those legs and things will kind of move with the current.
Right.
Whenever it's out there, it kind of frees that upper body, that chest part up so that it moves with the current. And that helps out a lot too. That's one of my favorite strategies on catching big catfish.
That's cool.
I like that. One of my other strategies on this is the use of the bullhead catfish.
Mm-hmm.
If it's legal on your body of water, I know, the Texas state regulations, the bullheads are not classified as a catfish. There's no length limit. There's no restrictions on them like it is blues, channels, and flatheads.
Right.
So I like to use those, and I like the green ones, not the brown ones. The brown ones don't work nearly as good. I don't know why, but and I'm going from experience from Toledo Bend and the Sabine River. That's where I fish 99.9% of my stuff. Some in Sam Rayburn, but most of the time it's Toledo Bend and the Sabine. So those green ones work better, and you can find those in just about any dadgum old pond in East Texas.
That's great. And so, one of the reasons why, I'll just give you the reasoning behind why we cut shad, Jeff, is just so that oil, that slick will get in the water, that blood, that those entrails. I mean, as gross as that sounds, but I mean, the one thing I was going to mention here at this point is Arctic ice is something that I use in the outdoors, and they're ice packs basically. And they basically will keep your stuff dry but cold. And the main reason why, if you're fishing with menhaden or pogies or whatever you would call them in saltwater, you want to keep your stuff. What's the other thing I was going to call it? For your mullet and that kind of stuff that you wanted to keep cold, but not too. You don't want it to get wet because it'll get mushy. And that's the same deal with these shad. Is you want to make sure you keep them cold but dry, right?
Exactly.
Because if they get mushy, they're going to fall right off the hook anyway. So it sounds like your dogs are not happy. You still there, buddy?
Yes, I'm still here. I muted it just a second so I could tell them to hush. The cat decided to make an appearance, and all these big bad chihuahuas decided that they needed to go jump up. Now I'm sitting here and got 3 or 4 chihuahuas, but then I've also got a pit bull, an American bully, and a Labrador that are all right here close too. And of course, the only ones having a fit are the chihuahuas. Right. The big dogs are laying there just kind of going, "Really, guys?
Seriously?" Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, I'm just saying, keep things cold and dry. Arctic ice packs or other ice packs that you can get on the market are good for doing that. Whatever it is, Arctic ice is just the kind that I use. And then another tech tip is to keep your shad and everything like that alive. If you have a bait holding well or bait well or anything like that you can keep alive, and just cut them as you're putting them on the hook. That's our little tech tip from Conroe.
Keeping your bait fresh and viable and like you want it, because there's nothing actually that's going to ruin your fishing trip worse than, say, you have live bait and it becomes dead bait.
Right.
Or you have dead bait that's cut bait or whatever, and it goes from being fresh cut bait to stinking, rotten, nasty cut bait.
And all soft and
people
mushy.
Say, oh, but those catfish love the smell of that rotten stuff. Well, to an extent, but if you can't keep it on your hook, then it's serving no purpose. If it's so nasty that you can't or don't want to, because, I mean, who wants to stick their hand in something rotten to put it on their hook, So,
right.
It's one of those things, keeping your bait fresh and supple is very important. And like you said, the Arctic ice packs, great thing, if nothing else, put that bait in some gallon sandwich bags that have a good zip seal on them, and keep them iced down in a really good ice chest.
Sure.
I tell people all the time, people laugh at me because I have some relatively inexpensive ice chests. I put it like that because I have almost all of my ice chests are the 5-day, 7-day, 9-day type ice chests, and I tell them, if you're out in the middle of the lake, the last thing you want to worry about is, oh my gosh, all my ice has melted on my bait and it's ruining, or my drinks are hot, or my stuff's getting nasty.
Trip,
so, I'm not telling anybody to jump out there and buy a $400 ice chest, but what I am saying is get the best one you can afford, and you will be a lot more happy in your days of field, whether it's hunting or fishing, if you have that little bit better ice chest, a little bit better ability to keep your stuff cold.
Cold and cool, yeah, exactly, and dry in a lot of cases too. And I mean, the other thing that we use on Conroe, just as an example, and obviously this is going to work on Richland Chambers up in North Texas, or any of these other lakes that are around Texas. This is just where Jeff is on Toledo Bend and Sabine, and then I'm a lot of my catfishing takes place on Lake Buchanan and Lake Conroe. If you don't have to have, I mean, if you're after eater sizes, you don't have to have fresh shad. I mean, one of the things that some of the guys on my fishing ministry do is hot dogs soaked in Kool-Aid and garlic. That seems to work well. And then another thing that a lot of the old catfisher guys on Lake Conroe swear by is beef heart, because it's hearty, and they will doctor it up with some stuff. And the other thing I was going to say is chum. If you use chum at all, I was just doing a video on the February issue that just released on our YouTube channel about doing catfish bait, doing deer corn soaked with beer. And I always say, if you have a hog bait, yeah, that's great, but you also got a catfish bait if you let it ferment a little bit, right?
Exactly. What's funny is what works on one body of water doesn't always work on another.
That's true.
I know I've tried the weenies and Kool-Aid type mixtures and everything here on the Sabine, and I can be fishing with an earthworm on one side and that on the other, have two poles right side by side and catch 10 fish on the earthworm and not a single fish on that. But then I can go to Sam Rayburn,
right,
and I can catch my boatload of fish on the wieners.
On the hot dogs, yeah.
So it's just, try different things. Don't limit yourself to taking just one thing with you for bait. Take you several things.
Right.
And another thing is, one that seems to never fail, no matter where you go, are earthworms.
Okay.
Whether you use red wigglers, whether you use night crawlers, whether you get them out of your own yard, it doesn't really matter. I mean, something about the flavor and scent of an earthworm. And so what that made me do a couple of years ago is I actually took a box of the red wigglers, the Canadian night crawlers.
Yep.
And I put them in my food processor. Mm-hmm. And I created a paste out of them. Huh. And then I added about 2.5 pounds of just flour, just regular old baking flour, to that.
Yep.
And I created a little bit of a dough ball with it. But before you use that, add a little bit of some type of oil to it and keep mixing and get that. And it doesn't matter. I used coconut oil in mine because when coconut oil gets cold, it solidifies.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, to use vegetable, and it doesn't get like. I mean, it gets pretty hardy.
Yeah, it doesn't
so
get nasty.
I put the coconut oil in it, mixed it all together, went out, put it on my hook, and lo and behold, I caught just a tremendous amount of catfish. Now, it doesn't stay good for very long. You have to mix it up like the day you're going to use it.
And use it right away, right.
Yeah, because once those worms, they decay pretty fast. Anybody that's ever had a box of worms get hot in the boat knows that they die and start decaying like almost instant. So use it quick, fast, and in a hurry. And it generally, I mix up just about 2 pounds of it per fishing trip. And so you take about a $2.50 box of worms, about $2 worth of baking flour, and probably about $2 worth of coconut oil, and mix it all together.
Right.
And it actually, for about $6, $8, you've got enough bait to fish all day long. And you take that, and all I really do is just reach in, get me a little, about a quarter-sized chunk of it, and take I think it's a number 2 treble hook that I use, and you just form a ball around that treble hook, and then you just dip it down in the water for about 30 seconds or so, and that hardens it up on your hook. And once that happens, then you're able to cast that without it coming off your hook.
That's good. That's good. I mean, these are just different, tips and things that you can try. For instance, some of the lakes that I do the hotspot fishing reports in the magazine, and this is a good time of year, for catfish. A lot of guys will tout, using CJ's punch bait. I've got one guy that prefers that. I've got, guys that prefer dead shad.
It's good
guys,
stuff.
And it just, the thing is, there's a lot of stuff out there. You just got to try and figure out what works best for your lake and but the thing is, the catfish are not the hardest things to catch if you kind of know what you're doing, I guess is the best way to say it. I mean, not necessarily have all of it, but just trying different things that work, for other people.
Catfish are just about next to brim, or about the easiest fish in the world to catch.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah,
it's one of those things where there are, like you said, there are dozens of commercially available baits. There's earthworms available in just about every sporting goods section of every store. There are, if you want to get adventurous, there's recipes online of baits that you can make yourself, right down to using grasshoppers and crickets and things you catch out of the front yard.
Yes.
It's just one of those things where, honestly, just you can go catfishing in any creek, any lake, any pond that you got permission to get into. There's generally a catfish of some sort in it, whether they're eaters or not.
Right.
There's generally just some catfish there. And one of the best things about it is you can teach the youngest of children to catfish, because you can fish with a bobber in certain areas with no current. You can fish on the bottom, which is by far the easiest way. Tie a hook on and put a weight about 12 inches above it, and Carolina type rig, and throw out there, and you're catfishing. And all you do is sit there and wait on one to grab onto it and swim off and set the hook and bam. So it's just catfishing is the most easy. But I'll tell people this: catching big catfish is an art.
Yes, it is.
Anybody can catch a catfish, but to go out and day in and day out catch big catfish, my dad could do that. And I can do it, to an extent. I just don't care to anymore.
Right.
When I was little, it was, we were always after that big one. And we kept and ate the smaller ones, but we were after that big one. And this is back before, there were cell phones with cameras on them and all this kind of stuff. So, if you caught a big one, you drove to the newspaper. And there were many times growing up that my picture and my dad's picture were in our local newspaper.
Oh, that's cool.
Because we had caught, some 60, 70-pound catfish. The biggest one that my dad and I ever caught out of the Sabine River was 89 pounds.
89 pounds. Holy smokes.
89. The biggest, now this is all 89 pounds, because the only way we had to weigh this now at the time was you stepped up on the bathroom scales and you weighed yourself.
Right.
Then you grabbed the fish,
and the
fish
right.
stepped up on the bathroom scales, and then you had to deduct your weight from the weight of you and the fish to see how much the fish weighed.
That's how we still measure our animals. We measure our cats and dogs that way. Weigh our cats and dogs that way. So
yeah, nowadays I have a scale out here where I skin my hogs and everything that goes from 0 up to 600 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So now I can weigh anything I want to. I have a handheld scale that goes up to 50 pounds, that is in my tackle box. We didn't have those back then. But, I can remember, the biggest blue cat we ever caught weighed right at 60 pounds. Biggest channel I ever caught weighed 33.
That's
so
amazing.
Things like that. I mean, we've caught some monstrous fish back when we fished for them. But, when I got up old enough to fish, I just realized that I honestly, as much as I love to catch a big fish, I quit fishing for those big fish because I couldn't eat them.
Right.
And my goal with the catfish is to go out there and catch ones that I can eat. So when I'm out after, a big fish, I'm generally bow fishing, which, almost that would be another show there, since Texas is trying to take our bow fishing away from us.
Yeah, I know. And then there's one legislator that's trying to pass bow fishing for catfish again too, and that's been dead for 12 years now, and that's now coming back on the docket too. So you got people that are not bow fishing for gar and then bow fishing for catfish. I don't understand it.
Yeah, I was there for the catfish bow fishing thing, and I can honestly say that we went out many times when we could to go bow fishing for catfish.
It was like 2006, right? I mean, way back when.
Yeah. And we never, during all of our outings, we shot one catfish.
Uh-huh.
One catfish. And everybody was like, oh, man, we're going out bow fishing for catfish now. We can go shoot catfish. And I'm thinking to myself, in all my years of bow fishing, I've been bow fishing since I was 13 years old. I'm 47 now. And all my years of bow fishing, I have seen a handful of catfish while I was bow fishing.
Huh. Yeah,
I've never run into one of those situations where we were going to fill our boat up with catfish.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to go bow fishing for catfish. When I go out, I'm after a 4 foot, 6 foot, 7 foot, whatever alligator gar.
Right.
Or I'm after a tub full of, 2 foot, 3 foot long nose gar or short nose gar. I'm not really, I'm after, my biggest buffalo to date was 56 pounds.
God, that's huge. Wow.
With a bow.
That's great.
So, I'm after those 30, 40 pound carp. I'm after those 50 plus pound buffalo.
Sure.
And see, buffalo are good to eat too. So that's a plus.
I just finished an article
catfish,
on that.
I just don't see the need to bow fish for, that'd be like saying we're going to open up bow fishing for bass.
Yeah. I thought of the same equation too. Yeah. It just didn't make as much sense.
I'd rather leave the catfish and things like that alone.
Yeah, you catch it with rod and reel or drug lines or whatever. Yeah.
Well, I didn't even have a fit whenever they brought in the regulations where we could only shoot one alligator gar a day.
Right.
I was like, okay, I see the reasoning behind that, and I'm on board with that to an extent. But when I can go out into the middle of Toledo Bend, and there are dozens and dozens of gar flipping around my boat, and you're shooting in the daytime.
Yeah.
You can't tell whether that's a 4 foot fish, a 3 foot fish, or a 5 foot fish just from a comes up, sucks some air, and goes down. So you're making a snapshot.
Right.
And what this law is going to do with them saying, you can't shoot anything over a certain length or something like that, what that's going to do is make outlaws out of every single bow fisherman out there. And I honestly think that that's their idea, what they want to do.
Yeah.
Because what am I going to do? Well, I make a snapshot and pull him in. Oh no, he's too short.
Right.
Well, now I've got a mortally wounded alligator gar that's going to die.
You got
and I eat gar.
Yeah, I do too.
So what do?
Right.
I unscrew my tip. I get that fish off of there as fast as I can and turn him loose. That's all you can do. It's just like if you catch a small catfish that swallows the hook, he's not legal. So you have to
throw him back,
cut your line or whatever and leave your hook in his gut and just toss the dice that he dies or doesn't die and turn him loose. Well, you're going to be doing that, and all of a sudden people are going to start seeing all these 6 foot, 8 foot gar floating around these lakes, and game wardens are going to be cracking down. Oh, look what we're doing. We got to stop bow fishing altogether.
Yeah. All of a sudden it's going to be a slippery slope. Well, that is a whole nother show. I mean, I think it's an interesting...
Right, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. It's an interesting fact, and I'm part of the Lone Star Bow Hunters Association doing their magazine for them, and then their blog and their website stuff, and then I do, I'm part of Hill Country Bow Hunters, which is my local one. All of these guys are rising up as far as the whole thought goes on those kind of things. But yeah, it's definitely and it's fishing. I mean, so we might as well talk about it on a fishing podcast. So, no, I think it's good. What I was going to run around with you on these bigger catfish is we typically will set the up shallow, setting jugs up in coves and that kind of stuff. But if you're jug fishing, you can also set between, 12 to 25 foot of water. Am I saying that right? I can't remember off the top of my head.
The deepest water that I have set with any of my jugs is about 14 or 15 feet of water.
Okay.
And honestly, tore the fish up. That was on Toledo Bend, a place called Cryptohulk Creek.
I'm familiar with that.
Right next to Toomey's Bridge, which is the bridge. You've got a boat ramp right off the side of it, right there on Cryptohulk Creek. The bridge goes across it, and which I live just a very short distance from Cryptohulk Creek.
Right. And
I'm kind of in between the Sabine River and Cryptohulk Creek, and I fished right there where the old road, before they built the new road and everything, there was an old road that went through there before it all flooded. And basically, I love to fish that road bed.
Okay.
And it's about 14 foot deep right there at times. And we have just literally, and one day I took my dad when he was pretty sick with cancer. And we put my boat in, and we just put our jug lines right up that old boat. I mean, you could sit there and watch cars drive by. That's how close we were to the highway. And in 8 hours' time, we caught 56 catfish, keeper catfish, which we had to turn the 3 or 4 that were over our limit of loose, but we came home with our limit 50, 25 for me, 25 for him.
Yeah.
And, in 8 hours' time, we filled our live well so full of catfish that it was unbelievable. The next day we went to the exact same spot, put our jugs back out, and we limited out again.
Wow.
And, my dad, that was actually the last fishing trip, next to the last. That was the last successful fishing trip, I should say, that my father and I got to take. And I'll never ever forget that. And, in all honesty, all we were baiting with crappie minnows.
Huh. Interesting. So live bait, right? Or are we all using?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes, live bait.
And that's the thing with your yellow cats that needs to be said on here too. Your yellow cats, your flatheads prefer, live bait where possible. Sometimes we've caught them on cut shad or whole shad, but the funny thing is the blue cats will like the cut bait. And really, I myself, being that I bow fish and rod and reel and jug fish, I will go through and catch my cut bait through bow fishing. You ever do that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And I mean that's another good thing that you can get cut bait from. You don't have to go catch shad all the time. You can just get some cut carp or cut buffalo, something that's really oily, like buffalo or carp or anything like that. Shad, big bull shad, for instance. And I've made cut bait out of all those.
Yeah, man, cut carp is some of the best bait you can get certain times of the year.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something else. There are times of the year, I know here in the Sabine River, where catfish will only eat something that comes out of the river. I know that sounds weird.
No, that's interesting.
There are times whenever we have been fishing with the red crawfish, like the bull, that come out of the bayous and swamps there in Louisiana, and can't catch fish.
Yeah.
But we can go along the roadside ditches and use our crawfish nets and things like that to just rake the vegetation in the ditches and get the white-looking crawfish out of the ditches and tear the catfish up on them. Or take a cast net or a seine and seine the sandbars and get red-tailed minnows or shad out of the river and tear the catfish up on them. But yet at the same time, we're fishing with goldfish or with store-bought crappie minnows and can't catch a fish.
Okay, no, I understand that, and I mean that's interesting. So if I was to say this from a different perspective, that's be kind of like matching the hatch, if you will, right? If you were fly fishing, I mean, going with things
that's
that
exactly what.
Okay, good. I'm just using that as an analogy because I don't fly fish much anymore, but that's what we use as far as using flies that are similar to what's going to be natural in their environment. That's smart. And the other thing I was going to say for big cats that we found on Conroe and some other lakes, Buchanan and some other lakes, is to set jugs in the river channel or near the river channel. That's been, as far as using your electronics where you have them, finding where that river channel is, because a lot of those big cats will go follow that river channel, and that's how they feed.
Absolutely, and it's all one of those things of kind of being a student of the environment is, paying attention to the depth of the water, the current, things like that.
Sure.
If it's middle of summer and there has been no current in the river for quite a long time, or in a lake or something like that, the water level is low, et cetera, you want to set where there's some current, even
Right.
no matter how minute that current is. You want to set out in the middle of that channel so that little bit of current, that little fresh water flow is coming through there, or there's just enough, it's deep enough that the water's cooler down at depth, and you're fishing where these fish are seeking refuge,
Right.
so if you will.
That's smart.
So all fishing is the same, really. Whether you're catfishing, bass fishing, crappie fishing, you have to be pretty much a student of your environment,
Right.
and know your lake, know your river, know what you're doing there in order to catch have your best chances of catching. So catfishing's not nearly as complex as some of the others, bass fishing with pH of the water and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But you still need to know some things, because there's certain times of year, like late July and stuff, whenever those red-tailed minnows are really running up and down the river, the Sabine where I'm at, and that's what the catfish are hitting. That's what they're keying on. That's what they're chasing. There's times whenever the shad are spawning and running up and down the river, and you can just see just thousands of shad on top of the water. You better take the cast net and make a few throws and get you some of those shad. And I guarantee you, you take some of them, and what I do is the ones that I get some to fish with, and then I take a mesh laundry bag,
Mm-hmm.
and I will put, say, a couple of hundred shad in it, and get on the front of my boat, and I take my little boat paddle, and I sit there and I hit those shad and kind of bust them all up and make mush out of it. And then I hang that bag, like we were talking about chum a while ago, I hang that bag over the side of my boat, and then I fish down under that bag, and I'll tear them up.
That's a great idea. I never thought about that, and that's completely legal to do because shad are not a game fish, and you could even do that with some bull shads if you shot some on some bow fishing or caught some in your cast net. But, it reminds me, one of the things my dad taught me to do is to get a thing of dog food, pierce it like you're going to open it with a bottle opener, tie a string around it so you can throw it over your boat or throw it off the bank or whatever, and poke some holes in it, and the dog food will be a chum source right there. As far as just, it's kind of a waste of dog food, but it's a way to bring catfish in, and that's worked well for me too. So the same idea.
Yeah.
You got dog food. I know you got dog food. So.
Oh yeah, and most of your big fishing outlets have these. We call them stink baits. I don't want to mention any brand names.
Yeah.
But there's several that are designed to put into hook nets and things like that. But also, they're just stink baits really. And you can get those in little plastic tubs.
Uh-huh.
And what I will do is I'll take a metal coffee can, and I will poke holes all in that metal coffee can. I'll dump that stink bait down in that metal coffee can, put the lid on it, tie a string around it, and put it out there.
Same idea as my dog food. Yeah, that's great. That's perfect.
Same idea as the dog food. You just have a little more stink to
Stink
it.
in there. Yeah, exactly.
that rotten cheese smell from that stinky dog food. For some reason, the catfish loves rotten cheese.
Makes you want to puke. Yeah, that stuff. Yeah, that's cool. But no, these are all great tips. And I mean, my whole goal with this podcast, and my listeners know this by now, is just to educate and motivate and help you, inspire you to go have your own best of the outdoors. That's why I call it the best of the outdoors. there's so many different things you can try, but what Jeff and I are talking about are things that are tried and true for us, that have worked well for us. But your mileage may vary as in any of this stuff. But I mean, catfishing is just a great sport. So I mean, it's a fantastic way to spend time outdoors with your family for sure.
Hey, I know a guy that used to catch his limit of fish quite often with deer liver. Okay. Every year when he killed a deer, he would save the liver out of those deer. He would cube that liver up into, sizes just big enough to put on the hook, freeze it in water in his freezer, and he would actually use cans, like coffee cans and things, to freeze it. And then he would open it up and use it and just caught bootloads of fish.
You mentioned that. That's a really good idea, too. I mean, since some of us that fish deer hunt, too, or pig hunt, pig liver can do something similar like that. It's pretty hardy meat. But, one thing that I did with my father-in-law and I fished together for many years and still do, and I'm getting ready to take him on a trip next weekend, and we got together, and I would always do anise oil, which my grandfather believed in making anise, like you can find, and I use even star of anise in some of my hot dog, things and stuff like that my little mixtures that I make for catfish, and that stuff works real well too. So the same stuff you make anise cookies with, which aren't as popular as they used to be when I was growing up. Everybody laughed at me when I did that. I'd catch all the dang catfish on the anise stuff. Everybody kind of thought I was just using some kind of pukey crap, and I'm like, no, this is actually good stuff because the catfish are attracted to that strong smell of that anise. So that you can buy at H-E-B.
Always used the anise oil and put it in a little sprayer and keep it in the tackle box. And so if the fish weren't biting, my dad would break out that anise oil and squirt it on his worm and throw it out there. Sometimes that would be all you would need to trigger a bite.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. That's awesome. So that's a good, nice little tech tip there. Well, listen, we're about at an hour, so I don't want to take up any more of your time. I really appreciate you being on the podcast. Anything to say before we end this one, Jeff?
Man, just check us out at fishgame.com, both Dustin and myself. Pick up some copies of Texas Fishing Game magazine, subscribe, whatever. It's a great publication, not just because I write for it, but because I believe in it. And, get out there and take your kids hunting and fishing.
Yeah, it's a great time to get outdoors, even though, this time of year today it's 70 degrees, but it's supposed to be down in the 30s like tomorrow. So, I mean, I record these a week before I send them out. So, I mean, the weather is just crazy, but the colder and nastier and wetter the weather is, and that's also what I was going to mention, have a good set of rain gear if you're going to be out on a boat or you're going to be really hardcore fishing these winter months, because the first time I didn't do that, and I tell the story on this podcast a lot, I wished I had, So,
and I'm going to tell you something. It is so simple nowadays. It's not like it used to be when we were young, where you had to have one of those big yellow slicker suits in order to have rain gear. Now there is a company out there, again, don't want to mention names and boost them on without them advertising with us, but, there's companies out there that have ultralight little ponchos and rain gear that don't weigh 6 ounces that you can fold up and literally put it in your tackle box.
Yep, I like that a lot. That's really good. And I mean, it's just one of those things where you just show up prepared. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And also, just to be prepared for the winter weather and stuff, because if you don't like the weather in Texas, folks, just wait, So that's what they always say. But anyway, thanks.
And remember this,
go ahead.
It's always better to have too much clothes on and need to take something off than to be out there shivering and freezing. Because I have been out on the water whenever it was 70 plus degrees when we got on the water, and 2 hours later a cold front blew in and it was 56 degrees and I was in shorts and a t-shirt and shivering.
Well, and I make that point because today we are getting a cold front here in my part of Central Texas. I think you guys are starting to get it as well, and it's just one of those things that that just blows through. That just the weather changes so fast, you just got to be prepared. So that's a really good point as well.
Exactly.
So, thank you so much.
Be safe.
yeah, just be safe out there and have fun, guys. Take your family out in the outdoors. I mean, it's a great time. So thanks so much, Jeff, for joining us today.
My pleasure and my honor to be here.
And there he goes, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jeff Stewart. Man, what a guy, what a guy, what a guy. Awesome, awesome, awesome podcast this week. I really enjoyed my time with him. After we get done recording, we'll talk for like another 30 minutes. I mean, seriously, that's our typical conversation. We'll go for an hour and a half. But I wanted to cut a little bit short since we're over an hour this week, and I apologize if that's a little bit long for you. But, you know, the idea behind all this is I'm here to educate you and motivate you, inspire you to go have the best of the outdoors, which is the whole reason why I've named the show what it was 4 years ago now. It's been, geez, next month it has been 4 years. I can't believe it. It's crazy. But anyway, thank you guys so much. Please be sure to check out our fishgame.com newsletter. You can sign up at fishgame.com, obviously. Our newsletter comes out to your email box every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then we have special newsletters that come out on Fridays or Mondays, and then special email blasts from sponsors that buy, rent the list, if you will, rent the email list, and show you their offer. And it's just cool. It's really, really cool thing. You can get the podcast on every Thursday newsletter. We either do a rerun or do the new podcast every 2 weeks, and it's a great place to do that. You have the practical and tactical Tuesday newsletter, the Wildlife Wednesday newsletter, and the Thursday Texas State of the Outdoor Nation newsletter. Lots of fun, guys. Lots of fun. So check that out. Be sure to check out all the articles that I've been putting out live on fishgame.com. There's 4 new ones. I did one on the bonus ring, which is you guys that shoot a compound bow. This is a really cool product for you to check out. It is a little silicone ring that goes around your sight housing. Helps you shoot better at night, helps you shoot better, fast target acquisition, that kind of stuff. I have one on a shovel and a camp axe, which is kind of cool, from a company called Yay Cool and Iunio. And then I've got one on why to hunt with red lights for coyotes. Got that coming out. And then I've got one other one that I did on the Alps backpack from Alps Outdoors. They make a really cool Pursuit X, or I think it's Pursuit X backpack that I review as well. So anyway, all those and links to where you can buy those are on the website by now. If not by now, they'll be on the website in the coming weeks. You can check those out. Just keep an eye out on the fishgame.com newsletters and fishgame.com blog. That's where they're going to be appearing. Got them all scheduled and ready to go. And I just thank you guys so much for watching, reading, and listening. Have an awesome day in the outdoors. We'll see you next time.